What's going on, everybody? So I've seen Dune Part 2, and let me tell you, this was a cinematic masterpiece. This movie was awesome, and I'm going to get into it with a semi to mild spoiler review here on the channel. But before I get into it, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ring that notification bell, all that good stuff. So I've been a big fan of the Dune universe for the past 5 years, ever since I listened to the audiobook of the original Dune novel before the movie came out. I wanted to have a clear picture in my head before going in to view the movie. Never saw the David Lynch version of the movie. I've seen clips of it here and there, and it kind of looks hilarious, but I am a huge fan of Denis Villeneuve's version of Dune. It is just so grand and sweeping and epic, and it looks so real. But more on that, these visuals are an extension of what I envisioned when I was reading the book. Everything is mostly ripped clear from the page except for everything with the Harkonnens, although I know that that's just artistic license, and I love what he has done with the Harkonnens in this version of Dune. But going into the meat of Dune Part 2, this is a direct sequel to Dune Part 1. It picks up like maybe 5 minutes after the events of the first film. We waste no time getting into the culture of the Fremen, which is fantastic. The Fremen are such a rich and unique culture in science fiction that I loved every second of watching how they operate, their guerrilla warfare tactics, and the relationship that they have with both the desert and with the great sandworms, the Shai-Hulud. Like a month ago, they released a clip of Paul riding the sandworm, and it was stunning when I first saw it, and it was even better when I was in the theater. Having the surround sound and just the roar that the sandworm makes when it comes out of the sand was incredible to hear. So on the story front, this movie covers the latter half of the first Dune book. So this part in the story of Dune really deals with Paul and his relationship with the Fremen. He starts from the bottom, working his way to the top in their culture. He also has the allure of prophecy around him, which is showcased brilliantly by Stilgar and Chani's differing viewpoints. So he wants to start out being equal to the Fremen, but then as the story progresses and he starts to embrace what he's meant to do, he starts to become more of a leader and almost a little bit more of a tyrannical leader. He gives a speech later in the story that when I read it in the book, it was not nearly as bad, but in the movie, they are hammering home that this is not a good thing. Like, he is really becoming almost the tyrant version of a prophet in their culture. But his journey getting there is tragic. Like, you really start to feel for Paul, especially with the context of the first movie. He is resisting this destiny as much as he can because he just wants to live out a life, resisting the Harkonnens and being with Chani as much as he can. But things force him down this path, and when he eventually treads down it, he goes full sprint, and it's really sad to see. One of the changes from the book that might not sit well with a lot of Dune fans is the fact that they make Chani a lot more resistant to him. She's more of a skeptic about the prophecy of the Lisan al-Gaib, and the ending of the movie with her is very different from where she ends up in the book version. It might work for a lot of people. It works for the context of this version of Chani, but just as a fan of the first book, I kind of felt that it was a little forced because some of the ideas and concepts in the original book probably don't gel well with the modern audience, but that's whatever. Regardless, the story of Chani and Paul in this version of Dune is fantastic. You really feel for them as a couple when they're in their high points, and you feel the pain of loss when they start to break apart. And as many people have pointed out, that this feels very similar to Star Wars. A lot of people are going to tell you that Dune predates Star Wars. Star Wars took a lot of ideas from Dune. It's been considered the more mainstream, watered-down version of Dune. Granted, I'm more of a Star Wars fan than I am of Dune, but I understand completely where it got a lot of ideas from. The story of Paul Atreides is essentially the story of Anakin Skywalker, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. But this version, I feel, is a lot better because you get more context to it. You see Paul in a more relatable fashion, especially in the first movie and the first half of this movie. So when you see his fall, you really feel it. And it makes it a lot more tragic when you see the people that he's built relationships with either turn against him or fan the flames of this fanaticism. There's a lot more action in this movie if you weren't a fan of the first movie. The first movie, I'll admit, was very long, very much a lot of setup. But this movie does double down on the guerrilla warfare aspect, which I found fascinating to watch for this version of science fiction. This is where I'll give my one gripe to the movie, which is I don't think it had enough action. It's a visual masterpiece, but when it came down to the final battle in the third act, you really see most of it in the trailers, which is really unfortunate. I thought that there was going to be a lot more to do with the worm assault on the wall. I thought there was going to be more hand-to-hand combats in the field, especially when a lot of critics were saying that this was the Two Towers of Dune. You say something like that, and I'm expecting the Siege of Helm's Deep again. And that's what I really thought we were going to get with the final battle with the Fremen versus the Harkonnens in the Sardaukar. But unfortunately, that battle lasts maybe 5 minutes, if that. And I know that's very true to the book, but for a cinematic experience, it did feel a little underwhelming. That said, the finale of this movie hits home in a lot of ways. We get that final duel between Paul and Feyd-Rautha, who was fantastic. It was great to see them interact both in jibes and in physicality. And we see this part of Paul's journey come to a close as he fully embraces becoming the Lisan al-Gaib, the Kwisatz Haderach, and becoming emperor. So overall, movie was fantastic. It was awesome. I loved every second of it. You do feel a little bit of the length, but I think that's okay if you love slower paced, more thought-provoking films and stories. Only gripe I had was I wish the third act had a little bit more longer action sequences. And again, performances were fantastic across the board. Stilgar is my favorite character. He is now very meme-worthy, which never thought I would say that about Stilgar. So for me, movie's 10 out of 10. A lot of critics are saying the same thing, but for me, it's renewed my passion for cinema. I now really want to go start seeing more movies in theaters instead of just waiting to see them on streaming, but it needs to be of this quality, if not in the same realm. So those are my thoughts on Dune Part 2. Let me know what you think in the comments. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Let me know, and I will see you all out there.